The apartment on Dizengoff Street was quiet. Too quiet. A meticulous surveillance team had been watching it for weeks, every light, every shadow. But on August 12, 1985, at precisely 07:14 a.m., the most dangerous man in Israel simply vanished. Not a trace, not a struggle, just an empty space where a betrayer should have been. For decades, the Mossad had built a reputation for unwavering loyalty, an impenetrable shield protecting a young nation. But beneath that hardened surface, a rot had begun to spread, turning a trusted guardian into its gravest threat. This is the story of a man who held Israel's most vital secrets, and then, without warning, turned them against his own. Before we dive into this extraordinary tale, let us know in the comments, where are you watching Black Protocol from today? Now let's go back to where it all began. The year was 1983. In the intricate, often opaque world of Israeli intelligence, Yosef Amit was a name synonymous with unwavering dedication and sharp operational acumen. Born in 1945, he had embodied the very ethos of the nascent state. His early life in Israel was steeped in the pioneering spirit of his Zionist family, who had instilled in him a profound sense of duty and commitment to the nation's survival. This foundational principle shaped his character, propelling him towards a life of service. He had proven his mettle during the crucible of the Six-Day War in 1967, serving with distinction in the Israel Defense Forces. Reports from his commanding officers highlighted not only his courage under fire, but also an unusual capacity for strategic thinking, even in chaos. These qualities, combined with a keen intellect and a photographic memory, ultimately drew the attention of Mossad recruiters. In the early 1970s, Amit transitioned from conventional military service into the shadow world of espionage, joining one of the most effective intelligence organizations on Earth. For over a decade, Amit had ascended through the agency's ranks with quiet efficiency, becoming a highly respected operative specializing in covert operations across Europe and the volatile Middle East. He possessed a remarkable ability to blend into diverse environments, mastering languages and local customs with ease. His operational successes were numerous, often involving delicate extractions or the establishment of crucial intelligence pipelines, each contributing to Israel's national security. By 1983, at 38 years old, he held a coveted position within the crucial counterintelligence division. This department was the Mossad's inner sanctum, charged with the perilous task of identifying and neutralizing threats from within, protecting the very agents who served abroad, and safeguarding the nation's most sensitive secrets. This role granted Amit access to a staggering volume of Israel's most vital intelligence. He knew the identities and operational details of agents embedded in hostile Arab nations, the intricate logistical routes for nuclear sabotage operations aimed at slowing enemy weapons programs, the meticulously crafted plans for targeted assassinations against terrorist leaders deemed an immediate threat, and the delicate, vast network of collaborators in the occupied territories, individuals whose lives depended entirely on the Mossad's discretion. His understanding of security protocols, operational weaknesses, and the agency's blind spots was not merely theoretical. He had helped design some of them. He was, by all appearances, a model agent, a pillar of the institution. His direct superior, David Arbel, 50 years old in 1983, the director of the counterintelligence division, held Amit in exceptionally high regard. Arbel, a veteran of the 1948 War of Independence, had witnessed firsthand the immense sacrifices required to forge and protect the nascent state. He understood the profound importance of absolute trust and unwavering loyalty within an organization like the Mossad. Arbel had seen countless agents rise and fall, their careers ending in triumph or tragedy, and Amit consistently demonstrated the discipline, integrity, and profound loyalty expected of a top-tier operative. Arbel's confidence in Amit was not merely professional. It was rooted in a shared history of service, a deep respect for his competence, and a belief in their common cause that bordered on fraternity. Amit was frequently entrusted with the most delicate and critical assignments, his judgment rarely questioned, his reports taken as gospel. There was no outward indication to Arbel or anyone else within the Mossad that the trust placed in him was anything but well-deserved, or that the foundations of his loyalty were anything but granite. However, beneath the surface of this exemplary agent, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift was occurring. While Amit outwardly maintained his commitment to the state, internal reports and later analysis of his activities, pieced together from fragments of travel logs, debriefing notes, and intercepted communications, suggested a growing disquiet. His work in the field, particularly concerning the increasingly complex political landscape of the occupied territories in the aftermath of the 1982 Lebanon War, began to fuel an ideological dissent. Amit, it would later be inferred by analysts like Sarah Levin, was starting to view certain Mossad operations not as legitimate defense of the nation, but as manifestations of an aggressive, expansionist policy that mirrored, in his disillusioned view, the very injustices Israel sought to combat. He saw the human cost of occupation, the plight of the Palestinian populace, and the often brutal realities of counterinsurgency operations. These were not the sudden outbursts of a disillusioned man, nor were they vocal protests within the agency's strict hierarchy. Rather, they were the quiet, internal fracturing of a deeply held belief system, a process that began to chip away at the very foundations of his loyalty. These subtle shifts in perspective, overlooked at the time, were later identified as the earliest signs of a dangerous ideological transformation. The tipping point for this internal struggle arrived in October 1983. Amit was assigned a seemingly routine mission to Paris, a familiar and often bustling locale for many of his covert activities. The official objective was a standard intelligence gathering operation, involving the monitoring of a known PLO financier operating in the city's diplomatic circles. The mission was unremarkable on paper, an ordinary thread in the vast tapestry of Mossad operations that stretched across continents. Yet, it was during this seemingly innocuous assignment that Yosef Amit would take the first irrevocable step into an act of profound betrayal. His contact in Paris for this deviation was not an official Mossad liaison, but rather Pierre Dubois, 44 years old, a charismatic French radical academic with known, albeit unofficial, ties to various European leftist movements. Dubois was a fervent ideologue, a compelling figure who believed in dismantling what he perceived as oppressive state structures, including Israel's presence in the occupied territories. Amit had cultivated this relationship over several months, initially under the guise of an intelligence asset, tasked with monitoring Dubois' network for potential threats against Israeli interests. The relationship provided a safe, clandestine channel for Amit to explore his evolving ideological sympathies outside the rigid confines of the Mossad, a place where his growing disillusionment could find an echo. During a clandestine meeting, orchestrated with careful precision, held in a quiet, unassuming café nestled in a less frequented alley of the Marais district, Amit met with Dubois. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and whispered conversations. Amidst the mundane clatter of cups and the hushed discussions of unsuspecting patrons, Dubois introduced Amit to Klaus Weber, 41 years old, an operative from the East German intelligence service, the Stasi. Weber, a man with cold calculating eyes and an impeccably tailored suit, presented himself as a cultural attaché, a common and effective cover for foreign intelligence agents operating in Western Europe. The atmosphere was discreet, the exchange of pleasantries brief and to the point, each word weighed with unspoken intent. This was not a meeting of equals in the traditional sense, but a calculated transaction, a negotiation across an ideological chasm. Amit, leveraging his position and unparalleled access, provided Weber with initial information that was both valuable and strategically chosen. He did not unleash the full torrent of secrets he possessed. That would have been reckless, an immediate red flag that would have exposed him prematurely. Instead, he delivered carefully selected fragments, partial lists of Mossad agents operating in specific, less critical Arab countries, carefully omitting the most high-value assets to avoid immediate suspicion. He detailed methods of encrypted communication that, while sensitive, were not yet widely deployed across all operations, thereby allowing the Mossad time to detect vulnerabilities without immediate operational catastrophic failure. He also provided preliminary intelligence regarding proposed, yet unapproved, operations against targets in Syria and Lebanon, details that could be spun as mere speculation if discovered, rather than confirmed operational plans. This initial exchange was a test, a calculated risk on both sides. For the Stasi, and by extension their Soviet counterparts in the KGB with whom they had close ties, it was an opportunity to gauge the veracity, access, and long-term value of a potential defector. It was an investment. For Yosef Amit, it was the crossing of a Rubicon, the materialization of his internal descent into concrete, treasonous action. The information he provided, though not immediately catastrophic, was a clear demonstration of his access and, more damningly, his unequivocal willingness to betray. It established a precedent, a foundation upon which a far more extensive and devastating series of betrayals would be built, subtly, meticulously, over the course of the next 2 years. The seed of mistrust had been sown, waiting for the opportune moment to blossom into full-blown treachery, a secret known only to a few individuals in hushed, smoke-filled rooms across the Iron Curtain, and the man who had just begun to dismantle his own loyalties. The consequences, unforeseen in that quiet Parisian café, would echo through the corridors of the Mossad for decades to come. The first insidious tendrils of Yosef Amit's betrayal began to tighten their grip in the early months of 1984. The initial, carefully rationed intelligence he had delivered in Paris in October 1983 was not merely assessed by the Stasi. It was meticulously cross-referenced and disseminated to Allied intelligence agencies, most notably the Syrian General Intelligence Directorate. Their focus quickly narrowed on Damascus, a city bristling with Israeli targets, and crucially, a highly valued Mossad asset. Rafi Cohen, 38 years old in 1984, was one such asset. For years, Cohen had operated deep within the Syrian capital, meticulously cultivating sources within the military and government apparatus. His cover was robust, his network intricate, and his intelligence invaluable. In March 1984, however, Cohen's operational security suddenly and catastrophically collapsed. Information delivered by Amit had detailed specific communication protocols Cohen employed, including an obscure dead drop location and a burst transmission frequency used for urgent reports. These details, combined with other fragments, provided the Syrian intelligence apparatus with the precise leverage they needed. Cohen was apprehended in a swift, brutal operation by Syrian counterintelligence officers. His capture was efficient, leaving no trace for Israeli surveillance to pick up, and his subsequent interrogation was exhaustive. Weeks later, after a period of intense questioning designed to extract every last piece of intelligence, Rafi Cohen was executed. His body was displayed publicly, a stark warning, though the full extent of his compromise and the source of his exposure remained a mystery to the Mossad's Damascus station. For Israel, it was a profound loss, a seasoned agent gone, his network shattered. The official explanation cited increased Syrian vigilance, a plausible but ultimately incomplete assessment. Cohen's demise was not an isolated incident. Throughout 1984, a series of critical operations began to unravel with unsettling regularity. In Lebanon, a meticulously planned sabotage operation targeting a Hezbollah arms cache, an operation designed to cripple a critical supply line, was compromised before it could even be initiated. The Mossad team arrived at the target site only to find it heavily fortified and under unexpected surveillance, forcing an immediate and dangerous withdrawal. The mission was scrubbed, assets withdrawn, and the window of opportunity irrevocably closed. Similarly, in the West Bank, a vital network of Palestinian informants, cultivated over years under the leadership of Hassan al-Khalidi, 42 years old in 1984, was suddenly and inexplicably dismantled. Al-Khalidi's operatives began disappearing, one by one, their safe houses raided, their families interrogated. The flow of intelligence from the territories dried up, leaving the Mossad blind in a critical operational theater. Each failure, in isolation, could be attributed to bad luck, heightened enemy capabilities, or tactical errors. But collectively, they began to form a disturbing pattern that defied conventional explanation. Within the sterile, fluorescent-lit offices of the Mossad's Internal Security Analysis Division, a young, astute analyst named Sarah Levin began to notice the anomalies. Sarah, 33 years old in 1985, possessed an almost obsessive attention to detail and an uncanny ability to connect disparate data points. Her job was to review operational failures, identifying systemic weaknesses or external threats. As the reports of compromised missions piled up throughout late 1984 and into early 1985, Levin initiated a meticulous cross-referencing process. She charted every operational failure, every compromised asset, every aborted mission. Then, she overlaid this data with the list of personnel who had access to the intelligence underpinning those operations. Initially, her findings were tentative. Correlation is not causation, a principle deeply ingrained in intelligence analysis. Yet, a disquieting statistical anomaly persisted. Yosef Amit's name appeared with alarming frequency on the access lists for the compromised operations. He had either directly participated in their planning, reviewed their intelligence, or been briefed on their progress within the counterintelligence division. Levin's initial internal memos, flagged with low-level urgency, were met with skepticism, even polite dismissal. The notion of an internal breach, particularly one involving an agent of Amit's stature and impeccable reputation, was almost unthinkable. He was a war hero, a trusted veteran, a man who had dedicated his life to Israel's security. The ingrained culture of trust within the Mossad, forged in decades of shared sacrifice, made the accusation of internal treason almost sacrilegious. However, as the pattern of failures intensified and the casualties mounted, the skepticism began to wane. David Arbel, 52 years old in 1985, the director of counterintelligence and Amit's direct superior, was eventually forced to confront Sarah Levin's increasingly compelling analysis. Arbel, a man of profound patriotism and unwavering loyalty, initially found the implication personally offensive. He had mentored Amit, placed immense trust in him. The thought that one of his own, a man he regarded almost as a son, could be a traitor was a bitter pill to swallow. He reviewed Levin's detailed reports, the timelines, the operational overlaps. The data, cold and dispassionate, spoke a language of undeniable compromise. The possibility of an internal infiltration, a fox guarding the henhouse, was no longer a theoretical exercise but a grim, tangible reality. The psychological toll on Arbel was immense. The very fabric of his professional world, built on trust and vigilance, was tearing apart from within. With a heavy heart and a steely resolve, Arbel made the agonizing decision to authorize a discreet, high-level investigation. The stakes were too high, the damage too profound, to ignore. To avoid alerting the potential traitor, this operation had to be conducted entirely outside the regular Mossad channels. Secrecy was paramount. The target, if he existed within their ranks, would be intimately familiar with every internal security protocol and counter-surveillance technique. To lead this clandestine hunt, Arbel turned to Moshe Dagan, 45 years old in 1985. Dagan was a legendary figure within the Israeli security establishment, a former elite officer of the Special Forces, renowned for his tenacity, unconventional thinking, and absolute discretion. His background was in direct action and covert operations, not internal investigations, making him an ideal choice for a task that required an outsider's perspective and an iron will. Dagan assembled a small, hand-picked team of investigators, each vetted for absolute loyalty and an ability to operate in the shadows, even within their own agency. They were sequestered in a secure, nondescript facility, their activities completely off the official Mossad grid. Their mandate was simple: identify the source of the leaks, no matter how politically sensitive or personally devastating the findings might be. The investigation began with a meticulous re-examination of every compromised operation, every agent who had access, every travel log, every communication record. It was a painstaking, often frustrating process, sifting through mountains of data in search of the faintest anomaly. The true genius, or perhaps the terrifying depravity, of Amit's betrayal lay in its careful execution. He was not a reckless renegade. Having worked in counterintelligence for years, he possessed an intimate understanding of how internal security investigations were conducted. He knew the warning signs, the patterns analysts would seek, the methods of detection. To avoid raising immediate suspicion, Amit did not unleash a deluge of secrets. Instead, he carefully mixed genuine, damaging intelligence with carefully crafted disinformation. This strategy created a noise in the intelligence landscape, making it difficult for the enemy to discern the truly critical information from the less impactful data, while simultaneously providing a plausible deniability should any leak be traced back to a specific intelligence stream. He would leak partial details about one operation, then provide inaccurate data about another, or even genuine but less sensitive intelligence about a third, all designed to mask the true extent of his activities and throw investigators off his scent. Amit skillfully exploited the very protocols he was sworn to uphold. He used routine meetings in foreign cities for his clandestine drops, leveraging his authorized travel for cover. He knew which communication channels were monitored less stringently, which dead drops were rarely checked, which couriers were less likely to be scrutinized. He understood the psychological profiles of his colleagues, their tendencies, and their blind spots. For nearly 2 years, Yosef Amit operated as a phantom within the Mossad, a highly intelligent predator using the agency's own tools and trust as his weapons, all while the silent hunt for the invisible betrayer intensified around him, driven by a growing sense of dread and an ever-increasing list of fallen operatives. The noose was tightening, but the identity of the hangman remained tragically elusive. The clandestine investigation led by Moshe Dagan, now operating with the full, albeit grudging support of David Arbel, deepened with relentless intensity through the spring and summer of 1985. Dagan's hand-picked team, a spectral unit within the Mossad, meticulously reviewed every facet of Yosef Amit's professional and personal life. They sifted through mountains of documents, travel logs, expense reports, communication patterns, and even seemingly innocuous personal contacts. The tension within their isolated operational cell was palpable, fueled by the growing body of evidence and the chilling realization of its implications. The breakthroughs came in agonizingly slow increments, pieced together from fragmented data. Analysts painstakingly cross-referenced Amit's official travel itineraries with reports of his unofficial meetings. They unearthed discrepancies in his expense accounts, subtle deviations in his communication habits, and patterns in his foreign contacts that, in isolation, might appear innocent, but when viewed through the lens of suspicion, screamed betrayal. The team discovered that Amit had utilized what appeared to be routine operational trips to Europe as cover for a clandestine secondary agenda. Each stop in major European cities like Paris, a familiar ground for his initial betrayal, served a dual purpose. What emerged was a damning chronology. At least 15 secret encounters with foreign agents, meticulously documented. These meetings spanned across various European capitals. Paris, where his initial contact with Klaus Weber and Pierre Dubois had occurred. The divided city of Berlin, specifically the eastern sector, a known hub for Soviet bloc intelligence operations. The neutral ground of Vienna, a spiderweb of clandestine diplomacy, and the ancient, bustling streets of Rome, where a brief, ostensibly unrelated stop could mask a critical information exchange. Each meeting represented a calculated risk, a delivery of sensitive material, a further step deeper into the abyss of treason. The sheer volume and consistency of these illicit meetings painted a portrait of a long-term, carefully executed operation, not a momentary lapse in judgment. As the gravity of the situation became undeniable, David Arbel sought counsel from an unparalleled authority. Michael Harari, 58 years old in 1985. Harari was a legendary operative, a phantom within the Mossad, whose career spanned decades of daring missions and strategic triumphs, particularly in South America. He was a man of few words, but immense insight, often serving as an informal advisor on matters of extreme sensitivity. Harari's involvement was a testament to the unprecedented nature of Amit's suspected betrayal. His presence in the discreet strategy sessions lent an air of solemn urgency to Dagan's findings. Harari listened patiently as Dagan presented his evidence, his gaze unwavering, his expression unreadable. When Dagan concluded, Harari offered only a single, chilling assessment, delivered in a low, gravelly voice. "This is not merely a leak, Moshe. This is a weapon pointed at our heart." His words, imbued with the weight of decades of experience, solidified the understanding that they were dealing with a catastrophic, existential threat. The situation was no longer about a compromised agent. It was about the potential dismantling of Israel's entire intelligence infrastructure. Meanwhile, Yosef Amit, a master of counterintelligence, felt the subtle tightening of the net around him. It was not a sudden revelation, but a creeping certainty, a sixth sense honed over years in the field. Perhaps it was a fleeting glance from Uri Ben-Zvi, 36 years old in 1985, an agent junior to Amit, who was now tasked with discreetly monitoring his movements, a flicker of hesitation in his junior colleague's eyes. Ben-Zvi was highly trained, but Amit was a master. Or perhaps it was a subtle alteration in the usual operational rhythms within his division. A missing report, a sudden shift in protocol that Amit, with his encyclopedic knowledge of agency procedures, instantly recognized as anomalous. It might have been a small, almost imperceptible delay in receiving a routine clearance, or the way conversation suddenly shifted when he entered a room. He had taught many of the subtle tells of surveillance. Now he recognized them targeting him. The exact trigger for his realization remains unconfirmed, but the outcome was undeniable. Amit knew he was compromised, and his window of opportunity was rapidly closing. He decided to accelerate his meticulously prepared escape plan. Amit had not waited for the net to close entirely. He had been building his own escape route for months, even years, a testament to his foresight and ruthlessness. Using resources freely available to him within the Mossad's counterintelligence division, he had created a complete set of false identity documents, each detail flawlessly executed. These were not crude forgeries, but masterpieces of deception, complete with plausible backstories and expertly crafted travel histories that could withstand initial scrutiny. The culmination of this tense, silent cat-and-mouse game arrived on August 12, 1985. At precisely 07:14 a.m., Amit left his apartment on Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv, ostensibly heading for work, just as he had done countless mornings before. Uri Ben-Zvi and his team, maintaining their distance, watched him exit, blend into the morning rush. They expected him to arrive at headquarters, where a team was poised to apprehend him in a carefully choreographed arrest just 2 days later. But Yosef Amit never arrived. He simply vanished, dissolving into the bustling urban landscape, leaving no immediate trace. His escape route, a chilling testament to his operational genius, unfurled with ruthless efficiency. Rather than heading to the Mossad's offices, Amit made a series of calculated detours, shedding any passive surveillance Ben-Zvi's team might have had on him. He then traveled south, bypassing conventional border crossings. Utilizing the false documents he had prepared, documents that would have allowed him to appear as a legitimate, if unremarkable businessman on a cross-border trip, he traversed a rarely monitored section of the border with Jordan. This area, known for its porous nature and infrequent patrols, was a critical vulnerability he had long identified. From there, he swiftly moved eastward, crossing through Jordanian territory with a precision that suggested detailed prior reconnaissance before finally reaching the Syrian border. He was not alone. Syrian intelligence had been alerted to his impending arrival. Once across the border, Amit was met by a contingent of Syrian military intelligence officers, led by Jamal Hassan, 50 years old in 1985, the formidable chief of Syrian military intelligence. Hassan, a man whose reputation preceded him across the Middle East, greeted Amit not as a defector seeking asylum, but as a prized asset, a hero to their cause. The initial debriefing began almost immediately, likely in a secure facility in Damascus. There, Yosef Amit laid bare the full, devastating extent of his betrayal, delivering intelligence that would send shockwaves through the Israeli security establishment. He revealed everything: agent identities, operational methods, command structures, strategic objectives, and the intricate web of Israel's intelligence operations in the region. Back in Tel Aviv, the news of Amit's disappearance caused immediate, profound shock and incandescent fury. The scheduled arrest, meticulously planned for August 14th, now mocked them. The realization that their quarry, a man they had trusted and nurtured, had not only betrayed them, but had also outmaneuvered their own elite surveillance team, was a humiliation of unparalleled magnitude. Operations already in motion were canceled abruptly. Agents operating in hostile territory were evacuated with desperate haste, often under intense pressure. Protocols for communication and infiltration were immediately deemed compromised, necessitating a complete overhaul. The sheer scale of the damage was unfathomable. Amos Gilad, 55 years old in 1985, the Director General of the Mossad, found himself at the epicenter of an unprecedented crisis. He convened emergency meetings, his face grim, his directives sharp and decisive. The priority shifted from capture to damage control, a frantic effort to mitigate the catastrophic consequences of Amit's defection. Meanwhile, the repercussions rippled through Amit's personal life. Miriam Amit, 38 years old in 1985, Yosef's wife and a literature teacher in Tel Aviv, was brought in for intensive interrogation by a Mossad team. The questioning was relentless, designed to uncover any complicity or knowledge of her husband's activities. Miriam, distraught and seemingly bewildered, maintained her innocence with unwavering consistency. She claimed complete ignorance of her husband's secret life, insisting that he was a dedicated Mossad agent, a loyal husband, and a committed Israeli. Her denial, though plausible for a spouse kept in the dark, added another layer of complexity to the unfolding catastrophe. For the Mossad, the emotional cost of Amit's betrayal was already immeasurable, and it had just begun. The hunt for the traitor was over. The consequences of his actions were just beginning to unfold. The immediate aftermath of Yosef Amit's audacious escape plunged the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv into a state of shock, fury, and unprecedented chaos. Amos Gilad, 55 years old, the Director General, found himself presiding over a crisis that threatened to unravel the very fabric of his organization. The initial humiliation of Amit's outmaneuvering was quickly overshadowed by the chilling realization of the operational damage. What followed was a frantic, round-the-clock scramble for damage control, a race against time to mitigate the catastrophic implications of Amit's defection. Operations already in motion across the Middle East and Europe were immediately canceled. Missions that had taken years to plan, involving intricate logistics and immense risk, were aborted mid-execution. Agents in deep cover, their identities and methodologies now potentially compromised, were extracted with desperate haste, often under intense pressure and in highly dangerous circumstances. Communication channels, encryption protocols, and established dead drops were all deemed compromised, requiring a complete and immediate overhaul. The cost of this operational reset was staggering. Later internal assessments would conservatively estimate the financial impact in the tens of millions of dollars, a figure that only partially captured the true scale of the hemorrhaging. It was not merely about lost money, it was about lost time, lost opportunities, and, most grievously, lost lives. Rebuilding entire intelligence networks that had taken decades to meticulously establish, cultivate, and nurture in hostile territories would prove to be a painstaking, protracted, and often deadly endeavor. The ghosts of Rafi Cohen and Hassan al-Khalidi's network were stark reminders of the human price paid. The ripple effects of Amit's betrayal extended far beyond the immediate operational sphere, severely damaging Israel's credibility on the diplomatic and intelligence fronts. Internationally, the news of an insider, a senior counterintelligence officer, betraying the Mossad, sent shockwaves through allied agencies. Organizations like the CIA and Britain's MI6, which had long maintained close ties with the Mossad, viewed the breach with profound alarm. Their concern was multifaceted, a fear that shared intelligence might now be in enemy hands, that their own operational methods could be gleaned through Israeli channels, and a fundamental questioning of the Mossad's internal security capabilities. This led to an immediate, though often unstated, reduction in the sharing of sensitive information with Israel. Trust, once a cornerstone of these alliances, had been severely eroded, and it would take years for the Mossad to regain its full standing in the international intelligence community. Israel found itself, temporarily, isolated and under intense scrutiny, its global image as an unyielding force of intelligence compromised. While the Mossad grappled with this unprecedented internal disaster, Yosef Amit was already building a new life. His defection was not an impulsive act of desperation. It was a calculated move within a pre-existing agreement. After his escape through Jordan into Syria, he was immediately taken under the wing of Jamal Hassan, 50 years old, the formidable chief of Syrian military intelligence. For approximately 1 year, Amit resided in Syria, not merely as an asylum seeker, but as a prized strategic asset. His debriefing sessions with Hassan and other high-ranking Syrian intelligence officials were extensive, likely continuing for months. Amit provided invaluable, real-time consultation to hostile intelligence services, laying bare the organizational structure of the Mossad, its operational methodologies, its command and control procedures, and its critical intelligence gaps. He revealed the identities of agents, the locations of safe houses, the frequencies of encrypted communications, and the psychological profiles of key Mossad operatives, including the strengths and weaknesses of his former colleagues like David Arbel and Moshe Dagan. This intelligence was gold for the Syrians, allowing them to dissect and counter Israeli operations with devastating precision. Following his crucial contribution to Syrian intelligence, Amit's value was recognized at an even higher level. Sometime in 1986, he was transferred to the Soviet Union, a move orchestrated by his Stasi handlers and their KGB superiors. In Moscow, he was granted political asylum, receiving a comfortable pension and living under a carefully constructed false identity. This was no ordinary defector's retirement. Amit continued to serve. He came under the direct protection and control of Dmitry Volkov, 48 years old in 1985, a high-ranking officer within the KGB. Volkov, recognizing Amit's unique expertise, likely utilized him as a key resource. There are strong intelligence reports, though unconfirmed by the Mossad, suggesting that Amit was instrumental in training KGB agents. He would have provided unparalleled insights into Israeli tactics, counter-surveillance techniques, recruitment methods, and the psychological warfare employed by the Mossad, essentially turning their own playbook against them. He taught them how to identify Israeli agents, how to penetrate their networks, and how to exploit their vulnerabilities. For the Soviets, Amit was a living, breathing intelligence manual, a defector who offered not just secrets, but the very keys to understanding their primary adversary in the Middle East. However, Amit's protected existence took a dramatic turn after 1991. With the sudden and dramatic collapse of the Soviet Union, the geopolitical landscape shifted irrevocably. Many former agents and defectors who had enjoyed Soviet protection found themselves in a precarious new world, their value diminished, their asylum increasingly fragile. The exact details of Amit's fate during this period remain shrouded in ambiguity and conflicting reports. Some unconfirmed sources suggest that, in the chaos of post-Soviet Russia, he may have attempted to negotiate a return to Israel, offering further intelligence in exchange for immunity or a reduced sentence. Such overtures, if they occurred, were categorically rejected by the Israeli government, whose wounds from his betrayal were still fresh and unforgiven. Other reports claim he remained in Russia, living out his days in quiet obscurity under his assumed identity. The most commonly cited, though still unconfirmed, narrative places his death in Russia due to natural causes in the late 1990s. The Mossad, to this day, maintains an absolute and unwavering silence on Yosef Amit's ultimate fate, a silence that speaks volumes of the enduring pain and the unhealed wound he inflicted. He never returned to the country he betrayed. The long-term consequences of Amit's treachery were profound, leaving an indelible mark on the Mossad. Paradoxically, while his intent was to cause irreparable harm to Israel and its intelligence capabilities, his actions ultimately forced the agency to implement a series of rigorous, transformative reforms that made it far more resilient. Internally, the era of unquestioning trust was over. The Mossad implemented significantly more stringent systems of employee surveillance, extending far beyond the initial, subtle checks. Periodic psychological analyses became mandatory for all agents, designed to identify early signs of ideological radicalization, discontent, or personal vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile forces. Compartmentalization of information was drastically intensified, ensuring that no single individual, regardless of their seniority, could ever again gain access to the overwhelming volume of sensitive data that Amit had possessed. Information silos were strengthened, and the need-to-know principle was enforced with absolute rigor. The agency also developed more sophisticated protocols for identifying the subtle, nascent indicators of disaffection among its own members, creating an internal early warning system against future betrayals. In a grim sense, the Mossad was reborn, scarred but stronger, forged in the crucible of Amit's betrayal. From an ethical and philosophical standpoint, the case of Yosef Amit raised disturbing questions that continue to resonate within intelligence circles and beyond. Amit, it was inferred, claimed to be acting on principle, driven by a growing disillusionment with what he perceived as injustices committed by Israel in the occupied territories. He saw himself as a man of conscience, opposing an imperialist aggression. Yet the direct consequences of his actions were devastatingly real. The execution of Rafi Cohen, the dismantling of Hassan al-Khalidi's network, the suffering of countless individuals whose lives were upended, and the destabilization of Israel's security. His ideological convictions, however sincere he may have believed them to be, led directly to deaths and immense suffering. The case forces a brutal reckoning. Can political conscience legitimately justify the betrayal of one's own compatriots, the handing over of their lives to mortal enemies? Can the pursuit of an abstract ideal rationalize the destruction of lives and national security? These are not questions with easy answers. Yosef Amit's legacy is a stark, enduring reminder that loyalty, once broken, can rarely be completely restored, and that the most dangerous threats often emerge from within, cloaked in conviction and hidden in plain sight. Yosef Amit, the shadow that once moved among Israel's deepest secrets, ultimately found his final refuge not in the homeland he abandoned, but in the cold embrace of a rival power. His audacious escape, a meticulously planned defection across borders, delivered him into the hands of adversaries eager to exploit his unparalleled knowledge. For a time, he lived under their protection, a prized consultant to the very intelligence services he had once sworn to dismantle. Yet even as the walls of the Soviet Empire crumbled around him, his path remained shrouded, ending in unconfirmed reports of a quiet demise in Russia, far from the land whose trust he had so profoundly shattered. His name, a whispered wound within the Mossad, became a stark monument to the fragility of loyalty. His legacy, however, extends beyond the personal tragedy of a fallen agent. It stands as a chilling paradox. Amit sought to dismantle, to expose what he believed to be fundamental injustices, yet his actions inadvertently forged a stronger, more unyielding shield for the nation he renounced. The reforms born from his betrayal, the tightened protocols, the psychological vigilance, the intensified compartmentalization, transformed the Mossad, hardening it against future incursions. This saga compels us to confront the uncomfortable truth that even the most profound conviction, when warped, can become a weapon, inflicting indelible scars and demanding a price measured not in currency, but in human lives and shattered faith. It forces us to ask whether any ideology, however noble in its genesis, can justify the ultimate act of betrayal and the suffering it leaves in its wake. We've explored the cold facts and the profound implications of Yosef Amit's defection. But what is your judgment? Was he a man of principle, driven by an unshakable, albeit misguided conviction, or simply a traitor who traded lives for ideology? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If the unseen battles fought in the shadows intrigue you, consider exploring another true crime story from the Black Protocol archives. Don't forget to like this video if you found this investigation compelling, and subscribe to Black Protocol for more chronicles from the darkest corners of history. Your support fuels our journey into these untold narratives.